On to the debate, which links quite nicely into that last piece. We have two debates this afternoon, and you'll notice that Martin has joined Chris on stage here in Dictionary Corner, and that is because Graham has moved across to the left and is joining our expert witnesses. Graham has two hats on. He's a multitasking Renaissance man, and he's going to take part in this panel. So, will private 5G kill the wireless LAN? That is the panel. We go where others fear to tread with this one. It's a big question. Public network operators don't always have a monopoly. Private 5G networks, you know, what are they going to do? There are a lot of questions here. Is it a real opportunity for telcos? How far can 5G penetrate into the enterprise? Let us find out. So, as this morning, we have our expert witnesses, and we're going to take it in turns for their 3-minute pitches. There's a big clock on the screen opposite there. 3-minute pitches on the subject. So first of all, I'd like to ask Paul to come to the lectern. Paul Adams is our first expert witness. Paul is Marketing Director for Nokia Europe. Paul.
Afternoon. So I've known Graham Wilde for about 20 years, and his knowledge of drugs is much better than he originally said. And I'm not sure I can beat that in terms of humour, but I'm going to have a bit of a go. So I'm going to try something a bit more light-hearted than perhaps we've had before. So, will private 5G kill the wireless LAN? Well, we could talk about this question, but let's first talk about dead economists. 2 words this afternoon: Thomas Schumpeter. There you have it. I'm not a betting man, even with the World Cup at the minute, but I think this morning you would have got good odds at the bookies on a bloke from Nokia shouting a dead economist's name at you today. Who is Thomas Schumpeter? Well, he was an Austrian-born political economist. He served briefly as a finance minister, and then in 1932 he emigrated to the United States to become a professor at Harvard University, where he remained for the rest of his life. He was one of the most influential economists in the early 20th century and popularized the term creative destruction, which is also a term coined by Werner Sombart, who is also a dead economist. I'll get the theme. This idea about creative destruction is actually the important part. According to Schumpeter, what is known as the gale of creative destruction describes a process of industrial mutation that continually revolutionizes the economic structure from within, incessantly destroying the old one and creating a new one. That's all a bit Marxist, isn't it? But the bottom line is that new stuff comes along and destroys what's already there. Like the CD destroyed the cassette tape. Incidentally, the decline of that particular technology is absolutely spectacular. It fell from 442 million to 34,000 units sold between 1990 and 2009. That equates to a 99.9923% decline in 19 years. So probably the least future-proof technology in history. Another example is the way the car destroyed the pony and cart industry. This destruction is often an externality, an unintended consequence of an unrelated action. But to the question in hand, I don't think it's black and white. It depends on what you want to use the network for. We are seeing, and we are market leading in private 5G, that 5G takes over in certain situations where high capacity and low latency are important because of an application. It could be a production facility in a manufacturing plant, perhaps, or perhaps a port. The point is an application or the use case that needs something beyond the capability of an existing wireless LAN technology is the key point. There is no doubt in my mind that the CSP is critical because, frankly, there are very few companies that can execute wireless technologies or infrastructures for enterprises better than they can. And will their infrastructure help? The mobile edge computing? Of course. So, going back to creative destruction, what this theory doesn't allow for is that sometimes things end up coexisting. Sure, ponies are hardly the most common mode of transport these days, but horses have hardly disappeared, have they? They have found new uses, such as annoying car drivers. Or my daughter's case, have found a use helping disabled children at the Riding for Disabled Association, where they help 25,000 disabled children and adults with therapy, fitness and skills development. Much as I'm sure we could discuss horses and dead economists all day, I guess I should probably leave it there. Thank you.
Paul, thank you. Thank you, lovely. Thanks so much, Paul. Great. Well, our next expert witness is Chris Simcoe. Chris, please come to the lectern. Chris is Director of Network Applications Architecture for BT. Chris.
Thank you. I had two versions. One version if Howard, my CTO, was here, and one version she wasn't. Howard's here, so we'll go with the clean version. He just showed up this afternoon, so I thought we were going with the other.
Howard, you've got a very urgent call to go and take.
So I'm going to start with customer value and try and take you through to a bit of rock and roll. Connectivity is key, regardless of the technology we're talking about here. But that isn't really the value we're delivering to our customers. Some of the questions our sales teams are engaging with our customers on are, who connects your machines? Where are your machines? What condition are they in? Are they productive or sustainable? And are they secure? These are important conversations that really bring out the value of what we're delivering. Years ago with 4G, there aren't many industry CIOs. I don't mean telco industry, I mean in the sectors we talk about. There aren't many CIOs that would have been asked what their 4G strategy is. There is the occasional CIO and CTO in the industry now that's being asked by their board, what is your 5G strategy? Now, it's not that the conversation is about 5G at all, but it's really about this whole conversation about how wireless networks can really enable the enterprise beyond just connecting their people. An important part of this, though, is what are the channels that we use, even as operators? What are the channels we're using to have these conversations with customers? And if we approach them through our traditional mobile channels, that's one way. It's not really where the conversation starts. Obviously, we have our network selling business, selling networks to enterprises. That's an important part of it. But we also have to consider the Wi-Fi channel. You may have Wi-Fi networks today. We sell a lot of Wi-Fi into the manufacturing industry. A lot of operational technology in manufacturing has been done by Wi-Fi. So that discussion about, I have this Wi-Fi, but it doesn't do X, Y, Z, or Z, depending which side of the ocean you're on. You can get into that conversation and see, does 4G or 5G actually enhance that proposition? But it's a different channel to market there. We also need to look at the reseller channel, where there's IT resellers, and partners as well. We have to work with our partners on go-to-market strategy. We can't possibly fulfill all the use cases we're trying to deliver to customers without partners. One of the things that we really bring to the table, though, is this portfolio of capabilities to deliver that connectivity that is key, whether it's 4G, 5G, SD-WAN, managed LAN, Wi-Fi. We also bring our spectrum capabilities. We bring options to roam onto our public networks or take slices or radio reservation off of our public network to supplement where we have standalone 5G networks. How does this relate to rock and roll? Well, any hard rock fan out there might be familiar with a band called Van Halen. There's a perennial debate of Van Halen fans about whether David Lee Roth, the original singer, was the best version of Van Halen, or whether Sammy Hagar was the best version of Van Halen. But if you really understand Van Halen, Eddie Van Halen, the guitarist, delivered the value. So if you're debating 5G and Wi-Fi, you need to really think about who's the Eddie and who connects your machines. Thank you.
Brilliant, Chris. Thanks very much. Thank you. Ooh, who's the Eddie indeed? That's got us thinking. Excellent. Well, our next expert witness is Richard Band. Richard, welcome. Please take to the lectern. Richard is Head of Mobile Core and 5G with the Communications Technology Group, Hewlett Packard Enterprise.
Thank you. So, what was the question again? Will private 5G kill wireless LAN?
No, 5G will kill the wireless LAN.
No.
I think it was a question. I think it's, my initial reaction is, wow. That's a pretty bold and, I would say, almost arrogant statement to make at the stage we're in at the moment. So, private 5G is a super interesting technology. And I see a lot of experimentation going around, but let's not forget that Wi-Fi is a very mature technology that does a number of things very, very well today. And yeah, I believe in creative destruction as much as you do, but we also know that once the technology is in place, even if it's suboptimal, which I wouldn't argue for Wi-Fi, But even if it's suboptimal, once the ecosystem is in place, it will take a lot of effort to displace it. And to go a step further, I would say Wi-Fi and private 5G or 5G in general have been designed to do very different things. And therefore, I don't believe they are going to be annihilating one or the other. I believe they will coexist. As Chris was saying, people typically have already some Wi-Fi out there, and they're doing a very good job. It does an excellent job to do indoor coverage. It has a fantastic device ecosystem. The price point per connection is very attractive. But there are certain cases where it falls short, and in those cases, private 5G might be a good answer. And I say might because we still have a lot to prove. Our device ecosystem is not there yet. The cost of deployment, the complexity, the model by which it will be delivered, there's still a lot of questions to be answered. But my assumption, my belief is it's about coexistence. And that means for the telco industry that we do not have the monopoly on this technology. It means other players are going to come in and are going to make propositions to the enterprise to provide cellular technology. And so I think this is one implication you have to keep in mind. You're not competing just with the people you're used to compete with, you're competing with other people as well. The other thing is the skill set is required to be successful here. We talked about business outcomes, but even if you come back closer to the technology itself, today, I take the Wi-Fi, from the Wi-Fi angle, HP as a company has a big Wi-Fi business. I talk a lot with my colleagues there. They are used to go and being the enterprise connectivity guys for their customers. Their reasoning is if private 5G becomes an important element, then we must become the people that understand both sides of the equation and able to advise customers on which technology to choose and which one is best. And I think the same applies for us as the telco industry. In the telco industry, we have to be able to accompany the customers, helping them understand how the technology can help achieve business outcomes, but also which technology is right for which use case and how to make it easy for them to adopt those technologies. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard, that's great. Thank you, Richard. Thank you. Thank you. Aaron, just 1 second, because we are going to go to our video player again. The old VHS is going to get cranked up because we've got another guest who wasn't able to travel here today. And we're going to hear now from Terje Jensen of Telenor, SVP Network and Cloud Technology Strategy at Telenor, on what he has to say.
We have been running public networks and wide area networks for decades, and also private networks is within the scope of what we are able to do and what we would like to do. So we see that we know how to manage and also on connecting devices and applications in a secure manner. So for us, it's a natural extension, of course, on the public network into the private network space. And in a lot of those private network deliveries, we actually are leveraging the public network. That could be through a kind of a slice or a pre-slice setup. So from the telcos, of course, we see that private network is a very interesting business proposition. And we also see that private networks is a foot in the door in a way to a number of additional use cases and providing value to our enterprise customers in a much wider context than what we have been engaged in so far. So private networks is for us one of the big important tools in the toolbox, and it's one way to engage with the customers in solving their needs in a much more holistic manner than what we have been doing for. And then of course we see that the needs from the enterprise customers and the starting points are greatly different. Some of them are just starting from simple characteristics like connecting high definition videos, for example, which typically ask for a higher speed and perhaps some on-premises processing of video feeds. Others are asking for connecting a lot of sensors, which then of course, for example, connecting robots, which then of course for a stable connectivity and making sure that information is forwarded to a central place, while others are asking for autonomy. And again, so all these kind of things are characteristics we as an operator are able to deliver on, and what we see in other contexts. So for us, of course, it's a very appealing proposition to go into this private network space. And I think we also meet enterprise customers on the same level. They see that connectivity coming from telcos could actually be very well matching what they are looking for. And then, of course, it's no secret that telcos have been delivering critical services to a number of cases, and we also certified by the national authorities to deliver these kind of services. So that's kind of a match in a way from both sides, which comes together in this private network space.
Yep, thanks to Terry for contributing those views. So back to the stage now. I'd like to invite our next expert witness, Aaron Partouche, who is Global Vertical Principal Director at Colt Technology. Aaron.
Hi, everyone. So let me start by what is driving private 5G. Private 5G can have multi-form, different requirements depending on site, depending on the vertical. We can clearly say that Industry 4.0 are driving demand for enterprise 5G use cases. According to some analysts, we are talking about 30% or more than 30% of the projects that are in the manufacturing area. So globally, we can say that private 5G will be used to digitalize or transform business locations, offices, factories, hospitals, and so on. So another thing that are quite important to understand is in these branch offices, in these manufacturing plants, retail outlets, and so on, these are places where critical data is being generated and where we need to facilitate and we need to have an effective and secure means of networking to the cloud. So the OT networks will be replaced at one moment by more sophisticated networks like private 5G. There is no doubt for that. While OT systems like PLC and SCADA are being managed by industrial applications hosted on edge. I remind that 70% of the data generated in plant remains on-premise. So we can already find synergy on edge to manage both these industrial applications and potentially 5G virtual functionalities. So to explore what's possible, we did a pilot, including Open RAN 5G and 5G standalone core networks on our own distributed edge. We have been working with one of our customers, ICAD, a real estate player in France. And our customers don't talk about technology. They don't care, by the way, about if it's Open RAN or if it is a different virtual RAN. But our customer takes an innovative view of property, visualizing the office or manufacturing facility not just as a static building, but as a dynamic platform for data and services. This necessitates finding a standardized one network inside the facility to transport all these different types of data generated by a smart building. So, as a conclusion, I would like to say that despite the growing number of private 5G projects in enterprise, it's still, of course, a brand new area for most of our enterprise customers. It requires, as we said before, strong ecosystems. Different business models are emerging via several types of actors, mobile operators, global SIs, vendors, cloud providers. Each of them will cover different demands, sophisticated or simpler type of networks, and will probably aim at replacing the wireless LAN at the end. I'm not saying that they will. That's it.
Interesting, Aaron. Thank you very much for that. Great. Our final expert witnesses, checks notes. Graham Wilde, Head of 5G Business Development at CKH Innovations Opportunities Development.
Thank you very much, Guy. Good afternoon. In a different role to the way you normally see me. I work for CK Hutchison. We own a bunch of mobile operators around the world, 3 here in the UK and a bunch of other ones. We have 57 ports in 29 countries. We're the second biggest container port operator in the world. We own Superdrug here in the UK. We own a bunch of utilities. And we, most importantly of all, make beer here in the UK. So we have Green King breweries, which is by far the most interesting thing we do. And my role is in promoting 5G and 4G private networks around the world. And we work very closely with our port operations in many different countries, and we're putting private networks into many of those. I just want to talk a little bit about why are these organizations putting in 4G and 5G private networks? Because they need reliable low latency communications across, usually across a very wide area, and they use that for autonomous vehicles and for remote control vehicles like cranes and other remote control vehicles on the port. And you can't do that with Wi-Fi. At Felixstowe Port, it took they put in 280 Wi-Fi access points to control, to provide worker connectivity, and ultimately it didn't work. And that was replaced by 4G base stations. And that has been ultra reliable for the past 8 years. And it's a very similar story on any kind of campus area. We have a network operational at Heathrow Airport. Again, very small number of base stations, very high reliability there as well. But I just wanted to ask a quick question of you, actually. I want to get you to make a guess. How much do you think it would cost to put a 5G private network in this room for 5 years, fully managed? Shout out your guess. 5 years of private 5G in this room. Sorry? With backhaul, with the whole, everything, yeah. How much? Anybody want to take a guess? £10,000. 70k. No, a lot more than that. A lot more than that, right. It would cost somewhere between £300,000 and £500,000 for you to have that service in this room right now, okay? So you could see that most organizations wouldn't have a business case to put a little private 5G network in a little room like this, okay? But if you're a manufacturer, right, if you're a port operator, if you're an airport, then the business case stacks up very, very nicely, right? Because the cost of outage of your machines, of your critical communications on your airport or port means that 5G absolutely makes sense. It doesn't make sense in an office environment, and it doesn't make sense where you don't have a lot of, where you have a relatively small number of stationary machines. There we are, that's it, time's up, thank you very much. Cheers.
Graham, thank you very much. Thank you, Graham. I'll see you later and I'll write you a check. Is that okay? It won't bounce, trust me. Right, so we've heard from our expert witnesses. Thank you all very much indeed for your contributions. What we need now, of course, is a great telco debate motion for you all to vote and, well, debate on as well. So I think we should hand over to Chris Martin, our Coldplay tribute band. Martin, would you like to reveal the motion first?
Very good. Yes, I will indeed.
By the way, welcome. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's very kind of you. Varley's keeping his counsel.
He's doing very well.
He is. Yes, we have a motion for you, and the motion is that 5G will kill the wireless, basically. The wireless LAN. It will be gone.
What is very bizarre about rolling the dice for who spoke for and against is the first one I got against, and all the rest I get for, which is brilliant. When you look at the motion, it's deceptively simple. But of course, what it does mean, with 5G, of course, that means any G behind it can also be included in that. So to the point just made by Graham and other people, that actually the cheaper availability of some of those 4G components is certainly making it much more applicable in the private environment. And then, we'll kill the wireless LAN. And of course, we cleverly didn't put a timescale on it because because if we had, we'd have been shot down in flames. But I think what Graham has just described and the others have described is that this notion of taking what we deliver in this complex private network environment and removing all of that older complexity of many different systems is of course extremely appealing. Now that has to of course include the notion of it being affordable, manageable and suitable for every environment. And of course we know that in most office environments we're moving away from plug cables to wirelessly connected devices, so that will play into the hands of it, especially with the evolution of eSIM and things being better and better connected. But I think the biggest issue is really around this notion of what the business is doing with it and how 5G creates that environment which allows people to do everything they want to do. When you talk to the people on the industrial automation side of it, they talk, and there's a gentleman from Bosch described this very clearly, that on the one hand, you've got this sensor network, which has been built up over many years, extremely complex. On the other hand, you've got this incredibly complex set of fixed networks, some Wi-Fi, some other radio networks, and actually merging the two is what you really want to do to create the best possible environment. And what we have with 5G, and dare I say with whatever comes afterwards, could be the next debate, that will actually give us the ability to address that in a very easily manageable and much more clean environment for everybody. Thank you.
Right.
Martin.
Thank you, Chris. Well, with Mr. Wilde having gone stage left, I'm left to begin this motion. And I'd like to begin by saying this. We all know, everybody in this room knows, that every year this industry gets its knickers in a twist about something. It gets hyped up about a new technology or a particular market, rising share prices, falling share prices, all sorts of things. And it's absolutely par for the course for the mobile community to think everything is mobile and they're central to everything. Well, that ain't necessarily so when it comes to a business environment. When it comes to that, mobile can be an important component, but a minor component. And replacing wireless LANs in an office, a campus, a plant, or a factory has to take account of the existing infrastructure. It's there, and it's part of an expensive fixed and Wi-Fi investment cycle that will naturally run its course. Nobody's just going to rip it all out. So, the reality is that edgy applications demanding high bandwidth, low latency, form only a small fraction of the demand, and anyway, may not move the needle all that much when you think about it. Autonomous vehicles have been mentioned. Well, yeah, that's taken a while, isn't it? 10 years and going now. And I don't know about you, but I certainly wouldn't want to be now to participate as a patient in a real remote surgical operation. Oh, we cut your leg off. Never mind, we can sew it back on. That kind of thing. You've got to consider it. It seems to me that it's much more likely and frankly more sensible that we'll be in a hybrid world of fixed and Wi-Fi connectivity, with 5G being used as a supplementary technology, very importantly, but nonetheless a supplementary technology, as and when it's required. The notion that 5G networks is all important is simply wrong. It's a niche market, again an important market, but a niche market for a small number of very specific industries that Graham has referred to, some of them. Most industries, I'm sure, will need a blend of fixed Wi-Fi and cellular, and not a purely cellular-centric solution. Basically, to say that 5G will be pivotal to shaping the future of enterprise networks is pretty much like saying a phalanx of tubas will become the primary instruments in an orchestra of tomorrow. And what I say for that is a ginormous raspberry, and I urge you to join me and vote very much against this motion.
Nice job, Mark.
Right. There you have it. That's our motion. Very nice and straightforward motion there, and arguments for and against. So it's up to you to decide in a moment, but we're going to have a debate first. Ray.
Okay, the only debate this year to have Eddie Van Halen and a phalanx of tubers. Just remember you heard it here first. Okay, so will private 5G kill the wireless LAN? Are 4G and 5G private networks really as big a deal yet as some people are saying they are? So let's get some questions. We've got one down here, one over there, and I saw one at the back as well. So let's start over there because the microphone is there, and then we'll come to this one here.
So Ian Fogg from Open Signal. I would look at this as we will see more and more networks arrive, more technologies, because that is what's happening. 5G hasn't yet killed 4G, it's still around. If you think back to some other areas, people said that radio would kill theatre, that TV would kill radio. But when I switch on my TV set now, I can listen to radio on my TV set. When I think about, you can, it's just on the EPG, you can scroll down, the radio channels. When I think about this motion, I say, will private 5G kill the wireless LAN? Of course not. Even if private 5G kills Wi-Fi, which I don't think it will, I think Wi-Fi has its own evolution path with new capabilities going in there. Even if it does, 5G just becomes the wireless LAN. It doesn't replace it. Private 5G is essentially a wireless LAN.
Okay.
So I've done what Chris said earlier on. I've twisted the motion on you.
That's right. Let's quickly rewrite it. Will private 5G kill 802.11x? Could be the alternative. But no, I mean, you make great points there. Thanks, Ian. Robert, yes, we'll come to you next, and then there's one over here. So, Robert.
Hi, Robert Curran, Appledore Research. I'm interested in who you're going to buy this from. You've got two very different propositions here. Wireless LAN, I think Richard you've summarized it very well. It's a very established, totally ubiquitous technology that works pretty well for a lot of applications. I think Graham mentioned something similar as well. 5G is still, anybody who knows anything about it knows we're just at the very beginning of all of that. And so you've got these two really different propositions. And also, it was touched on this morning, telcos as providers of connectivity. So if I'm leaving aside the pilot examples today, but from an industrial point of view, manufacturing point of view, who am I going to go to for what I need to run my business? Am I going to go to my connectivity provider, who's maybe an expert in a technology that's only just emerging, or am I going to go to my enterprise provider, who I've probably worked with for 20 years? I totally trust the technology. I'm interested in how this shapes up, because telcos are used to kind of competing with each other, but now they're going to have to compete with the likes of the Microsofts, Accentures, Capgeminis, Deloittes, who are solution companies. Yeah. And I'm interested in how that shapes up. How do telcos respond to that? Is that who they see as a competition, and how does a buyer make a decision? Who do I go with for this stuff?
Yeah. Okay, that's a great question.
Can I sort of have a go at that one for a bit?
Well, actually, if we can start at this end first, because I think an extension of the question there is, if you're going to buy, you mentioned the systems integrators or the telcos, but are enterprises buying it directly from the vendors that are, developing the technology? So maybe we can start with you, Paul, and say.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
So the answer is both. That's helpful, isn't it? I'm not going to sit here and do a Nokia plug, but we are market leaders in private wireless in Europe right now. But what we're discovering is two things. So a lot of the customers we're working with, whether it's ports or whether it's manufacturing or whether it's companies like British Sugar, is that we are partnering with CSPs for all of the, actually, Neil actually said it earlier, which is about trust, because enterprises trust BT and other CSPs. But we are also seeing, so the I don't want to go product. The product that we offer, one of the products that we offer is literally out of the box. So I would take umbrage with Mr. Wilde if he thinks that it costs £500,000 trying a 5G wireless network in this room. I think he might be using the wrong vendors, and we should probably have a chat about that. So
we'll be coming to Graham next. Remember that.
but the point is it's both, and I think it's horses for courses. In my little 3-minute thing, I talked about creative destruction, which is how what's coming now destroys what goes before. But I did actually say that we're going to have a period of coexistence, and I genuinely believe that. Where we're seeing 5G deployed in factories, for example, we're actually private 5G in a factory. I mean, the advantages to that are really around productivity. So we're actually seeing the productivity gains of up to 50% purely because the machines can move faster in a more autonomous way and in a more safe environment.
And can I just ask very quickly, are you going in there and having to pitch against the incumbent supplier of whatever wireless technology is in there? Because obviously you're not going to go in there and go, yeah, stick with your Wi-Fi, but we've got 5G if you want it.
Well, if it's a CSP, clearly it's up to them how they choose to position those two technologies.
Yeah, I meant the enterprise, right?
Well, where we're selling direct to enterprise, it's not something I've actually come across, to be perfectly honest with you. And if I did tell you, then I'd have to kill you.
Okay, excellent. Graham.
Yeah, so just quickly, I mean, it's a really interesting question. And I think the answer is it kind of depends on the customer and what the customer wants to achieve and who they feel comfortable talking to. And also the complexity of what they want to do and the scope of what they want to do. So at one extreme, with some of the ports that we work with, they've bought the application, essentially. They've bought the remote control vehicles or the autonomous vehicles, and they need a connectivity solution, a reliable connectivity solution to make those things work. And at the other extreme, you've got massive transformation programs inside big manufacturers like car manufacturers and so on. And our role in that is just a tiny piece, and it would be fronted by Accenture or Capgemini or somebody like that. And we're just the specialists who slot into that little 5G expertise slot. So it really depends on the customer, what they want to achieve, how comfortable they are talking to a telco about those things. And also, I think we also have to accept that there's a massive kind of chasm, a kind of knowledge chasm, right, between the telcos. I mean, we don't know that much about car factories. We don't know that much about airports. We don't know that much about ports, really. And on the one side, and then the customer on the other side, who doesn't know anything about 5G and how that works, right? And their partners, their application providers, they may not know that much about it either. So it's to make it work, you have to have a kind of collaborative approach, and it's a sort of journey of discovery. And if you start to think that you know it all, then you've basically screwed it up. You just have to listen and be very patient and work together. It's quite the people side of it is much more complicated than the technology side of it.
Okay. Aaron, let's come to you. We'll work our way back coming this way.
So I totally agree. I mean, of course, it will depend on the type of project. It will depend on the complexity of the project, and GSIs and have good positioning. But it resonates also on our debate this morning. If we stay as a telco just on the connectivity piece, yes, I mean, we will just, and indeed, you're right, depending, each vertical is complex. Each vertical is, so the challenge for us is to move from this being just a connectivity provider to a digital service provider. So I know that there was already this debate this morning, but this is, I guess, one of the challenge. That resonates very well with this question, because private 5G, particularly private 5G, is an enabler for new application for enterprise. It's exactly what you said. They don't care about what type of 5G we are providing. We will just talk about applications and what they would like to get while we are talking about 5G. So it's quite related to this debate this morning.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Richard.
I think you asked the question, how will they buy? And I think the question is, what will they buy? So I agree with Graham's point. Some people will just buy connectivity because they've started down a path to do something, like the AGVs, and they realize that their existing connectivity solution is falling short, and they just actively go look for somebody else to provide that connectivity. And others, they're doing a larger transformation, and you will not be in touch. They will not buy from the connectivity supplier in whatever form because they're buying from an integrator. The other dimension I think is important is what they buy in terms of, do they buy a product or do they buy a service? I think today a lot of the people that are interested in private 5G are the front runners. They're technologically savvy, and they have sufficient engineering resources on their side to accompany the introduction of this technology. And I would say also the deployment of the technology is probably in a silo, not considering too much how it will work with the existing infrastructure. I think as we move forward in the market, we will find the next wave of people adopting this will not want to spend the cycles doing this. And this is where I think the opportunity lies for the operators. So they need somebody to buy this from as a managed service as opposed to technology. Mm-hmm. And this is probably also the big difference with the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi is, in the end, a relatively simple technology to operate. 5G is not. So my message to everybody in this room is, as a telco industry, private 5G can be a real interesting growth opportunity for us. I'm not believing that long-term the spectrum will protect us. We're already seeing spectrum being opened up, and governments, frankly, don't give a damn whether telcos are going to be successful with 5G or somebody else, as long as they get the productivity gains for the wider economy. But the managed service capability is super important, in my opinion, and here's why I think, as an industry, we have a card to play, and we don't emphasize it enough.
Okay, excellent. Chris?
I think partnerships are key for this. I talked about different channels in the brief, but that's inside the business and outside the business. If you look at a lot of the telcos that are being successful in this area, they've all set up sort of a solution sales capability, really. So it's not really about connectivity. We've talked about that. So we've set up Division X within our enterprise business. I think if I do this, I get a bonus.
You're a West Ham fan.
Easy money.
You're a West Ham fan.
We get all our partners to do this, some of which are here. But no, there's working with different partners, whether it's SIs, whether it's hyperscalers who are focused in specific industries. We've set up a partnership board, to work across different industries to really latch on to those conversations that are going on. But also within the business itself, we already sell, I mentioned Wi-Fi into manufacturing, and how do you tap into that conversation if it evolves to private networks? That team is key to that discussion as well. But also, we have a surveillance business. You want to do a surveillance sale in a certain environment, that's a pull-through for a 5G private network. So partnerships inside the business and outside the business are key.
Okay. I think the pub that Graham was in maybe needs a surveillance system in there.
No, they don't.
Right. We're going to come to Neil for a quick comment, and then we're going to go to the next question over there. Oh, yeah, okay. So just want to check, do we have, oh yes, if we can get that, who was it who had a question over this side of the room? Yeah, okay.
Ray, can I just make one quick addition?
Yes, yeah.
So one of the things which occurs to me is that around and it came, and Graham mentioned it, I think Chris mentioned it as well, that what is driving it within the enterprise market? And certainly my experience when looking at applications is the people developing applications, people managing them, they never think about the connectivity. So that there's a real, and I think the point that Graham made about 5G being there and people not really understanding what it is. We've made a history, certainly the how many years you've been in the industry, Martin, and the years I've been in it, we have overcomplicated things and not explaining it enough, not clearly enough as to how it relates to all the other parties that need to use it. And it goes back to the cloud debate and all the debates that we've got to bring so many components together to address a whole enterprise. The network is great, but it's not enough. And it needs to be seen in context, which I think is what Robert was talking about. Thank you.
I think just one thing I'd like to build on is this kind of notion that 5G is better than Wi-Fi. And because it's 100% not the case. I mean, it's more or less exactly the same technology. And the problem, the issue that we've had is we've allowed, or enterprises have allowed their kind of IT department to bang a few radios up on the ceiling, plug them into a switch, and say, "Hey, Wi-Fi's here." And when you do a private network, part of the reason the boxes for a private 5G or the capability for a private 5G is one part of the cost. But when you build a private 5G network, you've got a much more kind of managed deployment with people checking frequencies, mapping it out everywhere. People just don't do enough of that in wireless LAN because they want to deploy it in a simple way with a simple password. Wi-Fi has almost every single feature that 5G or any other 3GPP capability has. Maybe some less on the roaming side, that's probably it, although there's some enhancements to that now. But when you're in a properly built Wi-Fi network. And it shows and you can tell. And so, I think we've got into a scenario where there's an element of ugliness around wireless that people think, well, if I do, and 5G is this new shiny thing on it works, it's great, look how fast it is, 800 meg in the centre of London, boom, I want some of that in my office or my factory, right? Because they've done a bad job of implementing wireless. And I think the key thing we need to really make sure is that if we are putting 5G in to fix that, inverted commas, that we do it in a way that makes that it works and that we can manage it, and more importantly, that we can monitor it and say, hey, customer, this isn't working the way it should be because X. And we've had a scenario where we put private 5G networks in, we're using the building's infrastructure for antennas and cabling. There's a flood and half the building disappears, and then you realize, okay, who's responsible for which piece of this puzzle? And it gets super complicated very quickly. So my point is I think these are technologies that need to work together, but I also think, one, we need to do a better job of deploying Wi-Fi, and two, we need to really test, is there real value in putting a private 5G network in there? Because once bitten, twice shy. You go in there and say, hey, you need this private 5G network, and they plug it in and turn it on and then do nothing with it. And it's like £500,000 a year. Suddenly it disappears, and then when we turn up with something, well, actually, this could make a difference. But you said this about 5G. Why did I believe you? So we've got to really make sure that we're building these solutions for customers in the right way. But also, I think the device guys, I'm going to challenge them for a minute, if I may be so bold. Why is it so difficult to go from Wi-Fi to cellular on every device? It just doesn't compute for me. There has got to be a simpler way to make them coexist effectively, and to come up with some level of standard that says, actually, if you're at this standard, we're gonna use your network, we're gonna signal it, we're gonna make it better. I find that the most frustrating thing, and just trying to get any sort of stats out of devices about what's happening is so difficult to then be able to say, actually, I've got a problem here, I need to do something about it.
Okay, great, thanks Neil, great insights, good point about wireless LAN networks. Let's come to a question over here. Please state your name and your company.
Yeah, hi, I'm Gilad, the founder of a company called ASOX. We build cloud-based private networks. I think the motion here is kind of unfair. I think the question was, will enterprise-owned 5G kill telco-owned 5G for private use cases? That should have been, but evidently this is a sponsored event, so we didn't ask that question.
The motions have nothing to do with any sponsors.
Fair enough. So let's ask that. And I think the comments made before actually proved why enterprise-owned 5G will kill telecom-owned private 5G, because there's so many unnecessary hurdles these gentlemen are putting, and they're ignoring the end customers. So, we followed the process of wireless LAN, and we developed wireless LAN for 20 years. It was successful because big corporates couldn't stop it. And that's what's happening in enterprise 5G. The big corporates, the governments gave spectrum, and now real industry players can take over. So I think the question then lends to the panel. In 5 years, how much of the private 5G business will be dominated by telcos? And anybody who says more than 10%, please explain.
I would say 10%. I would have said 10%. No, it's got nothing, if you want to be successful at this, it's got nothing to do with what spectrum you own. And it's got nothing to do with selling in the way that telcos sell like mobile subscriptions to big businesses, right? It's almost a completely different business. And the only thing that connects it, I would argue, to mainstream telecoms is the word 5G, right? Or 4G, if you want to use 4G. I think the vast majority in, what was it, you said 5 years or 10 years, whatever. Well, in that time scale, you'll have small systems integrators, you'll have big systems integrators, you'll have enterprises doing it for themselves. I think there's still a role for telcos as well. right? Because I think that we have some customers who really trust us. We have some expertise in certain vertical sectors that may put us ahead of other people. So we'll be in there, we'll be in the mixer, but we don't have, but we do not have an automatic kind of right to control this market in any way. We've got to compete with everybody else, and we've got to do the best for the customer. And if we do that, then we'll get, we focus on the right sectors, and we'll focus on, in our case, complexity, complex environments, difficult operating environments. That's where we focus. If we don't fuck up, then we should do quite well. So I'd say 10%.
Okay, Richard.
Okay. Sorry.
Richard and then Al.
Yeah, sorry. No, I would say I really don't know. I'm not, the reason I'm passing the message I'm passing is I think, as you say, there's no automatic right for the telco industry. I'm in a strange position, or an interesting position, that I work for an enterprise company, Hewlett Packard Enterprise. It has an important Wi-Fi business. But I've been in telco for all my life, and I would like telco to succeed, and this is why I'm passing certain messages here. Do not rely on the spectrum, emphasize your managed service capabilities. I don't necessarily agree with Aaron's point that telco operators need to be able to offer the end-to-end digital services. And in fact, I think they will fail miserably if they try. I think you're going up against very, very well entrenched people that have large enterprise go-to-market, that have established the partnerships that they need to be successful. And so I think the only route to success for telcos is, as Chris was saying, is partnerships. Focus on what you do best, focus on where you can solve difficult problems, be it on the deployment, on the operations, but don't pretend, just because you're an electricity company, that you're going to help everybody transform in the use of electricity, because that's the mindset that we as telcos have. Oh, there's connectivity in there, therefore we must own this end-to-end. We should not. We should focus on what we're good at.
Okay, Aaron?
So it's also what I wanted to say. I totally agree, but I will after explain. It's exactly the reason why we need to partner. And it's exactly why we can't Graham was saying that before, we can't understand all these verticals. So we can't control it. We are not under control. But if you don't move to a kind of digital infrastructure, at least advisory, let's say, approach to the enterprise customers, you will just be stuck in a price war for connectivity. And I can tell you, I think the value of, and we can see today the value of, look at the value of the different type of ecosystems. If you are a pure telco focusing on connectivity, it's probably less than an actor that is able at least to talk. And by the way, we are not talking to the same people. If you want to talk to a CIO, you need to understand their focus, their end-to-end approach. If you just come to talk about connectivity, you will just talk to the last guy. So, reason why we need partner. This is clear, and we don't. At least I don't pretend that we will be able to cover all of it. We need to understand these ecosystems, and we need to. So, reason why we need to understand in which verticals we may need to focus first. So it's much more indeed. It's not simple, and it's reason why private 5G makes it's not something that is easy. But at the end, we need to also to not wait and stick in our connectivity where we are good. Else, I think we will lose the battle, and connectivity may not be strategic enough to engage enterprise, and there are hyperscalers that could be even stronger than us at the end.
Okay. So very quickly, before we come to the end of this session, we do have a question that's come in from the online audience. And the question is quite a combative one. Why is private 5G still not taken off, despite years of promise? I understand that it's too expensive and too complicated. Anybody want to take that?
Thank you.
Or challenge that, or even agree that that's the case?
So I don't think it's been around that long. So I don't. It's not like it's been around for 10 years.
Feels like it. Yeah.
Well, maybe. I think it's slightly combative. I think one of the challenges in this space is that people who don't. So my background is CSP. That's my background, right? And I hate the word telco because it's not telephone companies anymore. Anyway, so my background is CSP, and we've been predicting, or the death of the CSP has been predicted for as long as I can remember, and it hasn't. It was rubbish then, and it's rubbish now, right? But the problem is, I think, that people who don't understand this stuff very well think it's easy, and it's a bit like. I don't want to go back 2 debates. It's a bit like ORAN. People who don't really understand it think it's easy, and it's not. And the CSPs are actually in the best position to support the private wireless networks. And I don't think that it has an unrealised promise, because I don't think it's been around long enough.
Can I have a quick go at that? I mean, the whole history of telecoms from 1844, when we sent the first telegraph, is totally back to front. Right? It's totally.
You are older than me, mate. So.
I was there. No, it's totally back to front, right? So it's a technology-driven industry. Maybe that's just the way it has to be, right? But technology gets invented. People who invent the technology try and think about what it could be used for, right? And then it, goes into contact with the customer. And that's the stage what we're in now, right? Is the customers are going, oh, right, okay, well, so I've heard a lot about 5G, I've heard a lot about Industry 4.0. Let's see whether this stuff really delivers for me, right? And that's where we are now. And it's always been like that. Every generation of technology is the same. So we're just going through the same thing that we've been through for the last 160 years.
Richard.
Yeah, I'm not as good as Paul in remembering my management gurus, but there's one that is, there's one statement that stuck with me, is that we tend to overestimate the impact of any new technology on the short term, and then underestimate the impact on the long term, which is kind of what you were saying as well. And I think this is a great example. I think it will be transformative, but it takes time before people realize, we have to get the technology a little bit more mature. There's work to be done there. But the biggest obstacle is for putting the technology, don't remember, was it Chris that said about the gap between what we know and what the customers know? We need to get the technology in the hands of the people. The few cases where we've seen that, where we've seen people starting to use the private 5G, then they go, oh, if I have this, then maybe I can do that. We'll never be able to figure that out. We need the people on the ground to tell us what they can do.
That's exactly right.
Okay, great. Well, we're coming to the end of the time. I think some very interesting points here. I think Neil's point about, maybe this is an opportunity for the wireless LAN brigade to step up and do things a bit different or a bit better than they had done. And also, I cannot believe that we got through that entire session without anybody mentioning network slicing. Because I remember, because a couple of years ago, with 4G and 5G from network operators, literally all that was talked about, we can sell a slice to this enterprise and that enterprise, blah, blah, blah. And we've just gone through a whole hour there, I think, without any mention of slicing, which is incredible.
You told us we couldn't.
And then he's acting all surprised.
At this point, I'm going to hand over to Guy for paddle time.
But it is nearly time for cake, so slicing does come in.
Oh, very, very good. Oh, pun of the day goes to Chris. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. Wow, I can't actually condense that down into sort of soundbite, can you? I mean, we covered everything there. We went all over the place. That's a fantastic discussion. Thanks so much. Right, so we're going to have a reminder now on the screen. Oh, dear me, there's a great big Martin in front of me. 5G will kill the wireless LAN. Are you with Chris and his arguments why that will happen, or are you with Martin and his arguments why that will not happen? It is time to vote, so please raise your paddles now. Bang! Look at that. We've got about 3 green tomatoes, or whatever it's called. Wow! That is, I think that's motion defeated, don't you? Overwhelmingly so.
So there
that was very good. Right, it's break time. There are tea and cakes, maybe scones. I fancy some Battenberg cake. I don't know if we've got any Battenberg.
Slice of
outside there, and we'll be back in about half an hour for the last debate, plus an interview with Chris. Thank you very much.
Brilliant.